Betting Network.
Welcome to the Lombardi Line. I'm Michael Lombardi. Today I am honored to be joined by the great man from Connecticut, Will Hill, who's filling in for Dave Ross, who had a little bit of a traffic problem, Will, driving up the freeway right by the Strip. We hope he's safe and he's going to get to work on time. Well, not on time, but eventually get there. But it's great to join you here, Will. It's great to have you. I feel like it was almost symbolic to have you on the show as we celebrate the return of one of my favorite players to the NBA court, Joel Embiid. Wow, was that impressive last night, Will?
Yeah, first off, we hope Dave is okay. He still will be fined because per Lombardi Line rules, you're not here. If you're late, you're fined. So that's just how it goes. But yeah, I'll basically give you the floor because this was about as ugly as it gets. I mean, played, 26 minutes, 3 rebounds. He looked awful. His hands are on his hips. He's leaning over. If you look at Philly, I mean, they're 2-8 now, and this has disaster written all over it because they're kind of pot committed. I mean, they traded everything they had left in the cupboard for Paul George. Maxey's a really good player in his prime, but Embiid, I remember saying this last spring when they were losing the Knicks. I think before last summer was maybe the time to trade Embiid. I'm sure you're going to say, hey, it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, because you're going to get to a point where, all right, you're not going to get anything back for him. And I don't think you can win with him. You've been saying for years you can't win with him. Shaq went off on him last night saying, hey, he's just not in shape. You can't win with this guy until he changes his attitude. He is what he is at this point. And from a betting standpoint, I mean, you can get ready to pretty much cash those under 52.5 tickets any day now because at 2-8, I mean, they're going to be an under team. They're plus 400 to miss the playoffs. Now, the East might be so bad that they find their way in, but I'm curious, where are you? If somebody gave you the keys to the Sixers, what would you do? Where would you start here?
Well, I don't know. I think a Senate subcommittee hearing has to be installed to understand how they gave this guy a $200 million contract, knowing that he's got a bad knee. I said on WIP, this is Jeff Rulin. Now, he's a better player than Jeff Rulin was in the time. But when they traded Moses Malone for Jeff Rulin, they got damaged goods with Rulin. Rulin couldn't – I mean, he was a good player, but just couldn't play because of his knee. This guy's not even in shape. Like, what has he been doing? They talk about, well, we have him on a program. What program is he on? Is he on the same program I'm on, just eat and get fat? Like, seriously, what's he doing? Like, what are they doing over there? And it just reinforces that under Josh Harris's leadership and Daryl Morey, they have no clue on how to build a championship-level team. If you think for 1 minute you're just going to turn the keys on in the ignition and become a championship team in April, you have no idea. You have no idea. You have to work to get there. And I think, to me, it takes hard work. And, look, that's one thing that Embiid has always run away from is hard work. And it's pretty clear. I think what people are seeing now with him is what I saw 3-4 years ago. The time to trade him, to answer your question, Will, the time to trade him was after the season of Toronto when he just wasn't very good again. Like, if he didn't come back after that crying and all that, and I told Brett Brown that, and everybody kept making excuses for this guy. But the guy doesn't have a championship-level commitment. He doesn't have competitive stamina. How can you be that badly out of shape, Will, and be an NBA player?
Yeah, and look, he won the MVP a couple years ago. I mean, I don't think he deserved it. I thought they gave it to Jokic. I thought they just, whatever happened with that, they got tired of giving it to him. And last year, I mean, he missed a ton of games. He always misses a ton of games. But say what you want. When he played, he was really good. That player, I mean, we're 1 game in. It's still early. But that player, I mean, just at his age, with his weight, with his injury history, these big guys don't age well. And you might be at the point where, you're not even getting the good out of Embiid. So, yeah, it's a disaster. Would you be interested in the plus 400 for them to miss the playoffs?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, I think, to me, that they're just a bunch of pieces. That they're a team that you can see someone from analytics built. There's no camaraderie. There's no chemistry. Everybody's numbers looks outstanding on a piece of paper, but coming together requires working. I mean, remember, last week they won an overtime game. They didn't let Paul George play in the overtime because the analytical department said he's had too many minutes. How do you build a championship team like that? Come on, it's not going to work. I mean, it's a comedy to think that. I'm sure Larry Brown's watching this and laughing because, to me, it's really just high-level comedy. I feel bad for Nick Nurse. He's in a tough spot trying to make this all work, but you can't practice because they don't want to practice. Do you think Embiid even practiced? I mean, look at him. He could barely, in 1 minute of the game, I got a text from a good friend saying, "Are you kidding me?" And the team's soft. It always will be. But I don't know if that's the right way to start a day in such a depressing note. Let's have more. Well, we can't because we're going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys since Dave Ross isn't here yet. So we'll talk about Dak Prescott and his inability to stay healthy this season, unfortunately for him. And now he's going to have season-ending surgery. And Elliot, our producer, asked an interesting question, which I'd love to hear what you think of. What would the Cowboys have extended him if he had this injury?
Probably. I mean, you're better with the contract stuff and the front office stuff than me. It's just, look, I mean, it's hard to find these quarterbacks. And say what you want about Dak. I mean, what if you really like him, you think he's the eighth best quarterback. If you don't like him, you think he's the 12th best quarterback. He's still pretty good. So they probably would have. I don't know how much it would have changed. I'm curious what you think. And I don't know if you're making, and everyone always with the Cowboys, the sky is falling, and it's been a disaster. The Mingo trade, I mean, the Jerry Jones, it's a disaster. I'm sure McCarthy will be out there and he'll take the hit for this. Could you make a case that, all right, just a bad year, they're going to get probably a top 5 pick, which means you're picking in the top 5 of the second round and the third round. This might benefit them next year, 2 years from now, because they get just an infusion of talent with some of these picks next year. Could you make that case or no?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think this is kind of actually a blessing in disguise. And maybe Jerry knew this was coming, and that's why he didn't want to extend anybody's contracts, because I don't know how they score. I really don't. They're a 7.5-point dog this week against the Houston Texans on Monday night at home. They haven't won a home game all year, but I think, to me, one of the things we have to do when handicapping these games with big spreads is ask, how will the other team score? How many points do you think you could put on the Cowboys? I think that's a fair question. Do you think the Cowboys can get to 13 points? And my answer to that would be probably not, right? I think they could get to 13 maybe. Could they get to 17? I don't think so unless Houston turned it over. So let's say 13 is the number. Then really all you're saying is Houston's got to get to 24 and it's an easy cover. I think that's how you have to approach these big spreads in these games. And I think Dallas can't score any points. And we know Trey Lance isn't going to come in and save him off the bench. So, I think the 7.5 is probably going to continue to go up because I think people are going to use the same logic I'm using here, which is, look, there's no way they can score any points with their setup. They can't run the ball. They have no explosiveness, and Cooper Rush isn't any good. Are you inclined to take the Texans and lay the points?
I mean, this is in that perfect range where, and the teasers haven't been great this year, but they've been really good lately. I mean, this is one where you just throw Texans in the teasers and you get them down to 1.5, and they basically just have to win the game. These kind of games, too, I'd probably look towards an under just because Houston goes in this game and exactly what you said. Hey, as long as we don't turn it over, we can't lose this game. So that means you're a little more conservative. You're a little more conservative on third down. When you're in field goal range, you kick the field goal. When it's 4th and 2 from 48-yard line, you punt and you pin them. So I think Houston just goes into this game with not screw it up mode and just try to play it safe, play it conservative. I don't really want any part of the Cowboys. I know laying more than 2 scores or laying more than 1 score on the road is not a great way to make money in the NFL. Yeah. So I don't know that I'm dying to bet Houston. But, maybe a Cowboys team total under for the reasons you said, maybe an under. But, I think throwing Houston in some teasers is probably a good idea. If they do pick, and if you look at the landscape of the bottom, and we always talk about, who's the best team, Lions, Chiefs, Ravens, all this. If you look at the race for the first pick, I mean, Giants are in the mix now, and that Giants-Cowboys Thanksgiving game is going to be an absolute must-watch on Thanksgiving in a couple weeks. Boy, could they get the first pick in the draft, the top 3 pick? Once they are picking high, if you're the GM, what are you looking for? What are you targeting? I know it's dependent on, who's available and scouting the top of the draft, but what's the first thing on your to-do list if you're Jerry Jones?
I got to fix the defensive front. I got to get somebody else next to Parsons. I got to get defense. I got to get, they missed with Maisie Smith. I think that's pretty clear. But we got to get somebody with 300-pound size inside there to help us to play run defense. We can't stop anybody from running the ball. Zach Martin's probably going to have to give it up. I mean, they're not bringing him back at his salary cap number next year. So he's going to have to fix the offensive line as well, too. And then, he's going to need a running back. But I think, to me, one of the things I think he could do, because when you're picking in the top 10, that's an expensive pick. Depending on what this draft will look like, he could use a lot more picks and get a lot of good players in there to help his team. I think that would be something he might want to do. But I said this last year, I just don't think the Cowboys are as talented as everybody believes them to be, Will. And I think, to me, that's where we've overrated them. I'm with you. I think that Dak would have definitely got a contract regardless of whether he had the torn hamstring or not, because how are you going to replace Dak? You can work around Dak. He's a good enough player. You can work around Jared Goff. You can work around Dak. I mean, let's be clear here. The problem isn't Dak. The problem is all the other pieces on their team that just aren't good enough. And I think they're going to have to find a way to fix that. And, that's going to take an off season, and Jerry's going to have to find some depth and spend some money in free agency, which they didn't do this year. I think that's the other thing. The other question I wanted to get you to is Houston. I'm not sold. I think Houston's a good team, but I think they're made out to be a better team because there's so many bad teams in the league. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, they were the hot team coming into the season. I think last year a lot of it was the schedule. They have not taken the next step. I mean, that was an uneven performance against the Lions. They're going to win that division basically by default because, who's there to steal it from? It's not going to be Jacksonville. It's not going to be Tennessee. Indy obviously doesn't have their stuff together. So, I mean, as long as they got to probably 8 wins, 9 wins will definitely clinch it. They're going to win the division. But as far as hey, this team's going to be playing on AFC title game Sunday, I don't see that with them. They're not on the same level as the Chiefs, the Ravens. So probably similar as last year where they get in. Maybe they win a game, but I can't see them winning more than a game here in this postseason. Can you?
Yeah, I think if they don't improve this offensive line, they're going to be a team you're going to want to bet against on the road, because I think what we saw them when they go on the road, the line gets exposed. Tunsil has so many penalties. They can't really block inside, and Stroud gets off rhythm. So I agree. I just think they're a mediocre team. Now, they get Nico Collins back. That certainly will help. But I'm just not sure that they have enough in the offensive line to really make it work. When we come back here on the Lombardi Line, we're going to go over all the line movement that has happened over the night. And there's some interesting line movement. How are the Jets a 4-point favorite against anybody? And we're going to see if it's the right line movement when we come back. It's the Lombardi Line here on VSiN.
Coming up Wednesday on Follow the Money, we recap the College Football Committee rankings. Also, Mike Palm with You Can't Be Serious, Matt Humans with Picks, Sal Powell, and Rich Gannon. Loaded Wednesday, Follow the Money weekdays, 4 to 7 Eastern on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Want to see who at VSiN is on a hot streak? Go to VSiN.com/picks to see all the selections and weekly leaderboard of VSiN hosts, writers, and guests. Become a VSiN Pro subscriber and get every pick sent to your inbox daily. Just head to VSiN.com/pro.
So, Paulie, have you had a chance to read the VSiN Daily yet?
Yeah, came in at 3 a.m. What's Bill doing up that late?
Well, rumor has it, it starts off with a 12-hour meditation session.
Then he just pours himself over film and live TV, really focusing and taking it all in. Bill's in with the biggest insiders, talking trade secrets, strategies, the whole nine, absorbing the info.
And then and only then can the writing process begin.
In Las Vegas, Bill's late night becomes your early morning. Wake up to the very latest betting insights in your inbox with the VSiN Daily. Sign up for free at vsin.com/newsletter. This is the Lombardi Line with former NFL executive Michael Lombardi on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Welcome back to the Lombardi Line. I'm Michael Lombardi here with Will Hill, and we're going to talk about some line movements. And I think one of the interesting obviously with the best game of the weekend, Will, is the Buffalo Bills travel host the Kansas City Chiefs. And this line has slightly moved, and it probably is because Pacheco was activated off of IR, meaning they opened up his window, and fully expect him to play this week. So that line has opened at 1.5. It went to 2.5, and now it's trending back to 2. What's your read on this game?
Tricky game. I feel like this is a game where if you bet it and you're wrong, you're going to feel like an idiot. Because if you bet the Chiefs and they lose, you're going to say, you know what? They were due for this. They've been living on borrowed time, lucky to beat the Broncos, maybe a little bit lucky to beat Tampa. They've won all these close games. Buffalo was due to get them. That's if you bet Kansas City and you lose. If you bet Buffalo and you lose, you're going to say, what? Kansas City always beats them. I'm getting Mahomes plus points as a dog, and I went against that. What was I thinking? So this is a tricky game. I do get the sense Buffalo, this is a chance for them to win. But I thought, look, last year in the playoffs, Buffalo, had a chance to beat Kansas City, and Kansas City went in and dominated the game. So this isn't a game I have a strong take on. I'm sure Chiefs will be a popular teaser leg. You can tease them up to 8. Is this a game that's going to be one of your picks? Do you have a strong, conviction one way or another on this game?
I think Buffalo's got to be kicking themselves in the butt for this game last year. They were the only team that really gave the Chiefs, other than the 49ers in the Super Bowl, they gave them really a hard time. They ran the ball 39 times in the game the last time they played them in that championship game. They averaged 4.7 yards a rush. Their only longest rush was 18 yards. So they were able to run the football effectively, consistently. They threw it 39 times, too, in the game, Will. He completed 26, but he only threw for 186, right? So he didn't really make any explosive plays, and his longest play was just 15 yards. So they did as good a job on the Chiefs defense as any team. And it just came down to they stalled in the red zone. I mean, that was their biggest problem. They moved the ball. I think they were, they had a really hard, they were 3 for 4 in the red zone, but then that high red zone, they really never did able to get across that point. And so they had to kick long field goals, and naturally the 44-yarder was wide right. And that wind in that direction was a problem. Now, weather in this game, it sounds like it's going to be slightly raining, high 40s, maybe low 50s, somewhere in there. So I don't think we're going to have a weather game. But Pacheco return, to me, gives them now, the Chiefs, something they didn't have before he got injured, which is a 1-2 punch, right? With Pacheco's power and Kareem Hunt's power, they can actually kind of coexist. They can get Pacheco to be the early down, and Hunt could be the nickel back, which he was before for Kansas City, a big nickel back who could make plays in the open field, really kind of take Sammy Perrine out of the realm. So to me, I think there's vulnerability in the fact that you can run the ball on the Chiefs last week. We saw Denver do it. I just feel like if there's ever going to be a moment where Buffalo's going to win a game, they got to win this one. This is the one that sets up perfectly for them.
If you're Buffalo, you feel like, hey, if we can't beat them now, if we can't beat them this week, we're never going to beat them. And maybe, I don't know. I'm curious what you think. Does this start to get in their head of like, man, we just can't beat these guys no matter what happens? I remember the Bills, the Patriots were like this years back where the Patriots would just beat them no matter what. Bills were not on that level, but you get the idea. I'm curious what you think of the total. 46.5. The Chiefs have really turned into an under team because they're not that explosive on offense and they're good on defense. That being said, I just have it burned into my mind, that AFC title game where just ridiculously high scoring. Last year it sailed over. It's almost like two great pitchers where they face off and they want to beat each other, and it ends up being like a 1-0 or 2-1 game. It's the opposite of that where I don't know. Are we going to see a 31-28 shootout? I feel like both these quarterbacks get up for the game. Would you lean towards the under and over here?
I think, to me, if you just look at the way that both teams play, that both teams have changed who they are. I mean, Buffalo's finally became a Western New York offense, right? They run the ball. I mean, they run it effectively. And last year, they couldn't make a lot of plays. Diggs had that huge drop in the game. Remember that last year? Which probably would have been their most explosive play. But I think, to me, this is an under kind of style of play. I mean, the Kansas City wants to convert third downs. They want to play 36 minutes of offense, play 24 minutes of defense, and win the game. And that's kind of what they ideally want to do. But both these quarterbacks, I think, where the big plays come in is when the play breaks down, and these are the two best quarterbacks in the league in terms of, well, Lamar's in this category too, is second plays. When the play breaks down, what happens? And all hell breaks loose. So I lean under here. I really do. I think that would be the case. The next game we want to talk about are the Jets and the Colts. Like, give me some explanation of how the Jets are a 4-point. Look, I know Joe Flacco's old. I know he hasn't played well in the last 2 weeks. I know the Colts haven't played well over the last 2 weeks, the last 4 weeks, frankly. I think it's a franchise that is trending in the wrong direction. If you're Chris Ballard and you're the general manager, you're nervous about this. But how are the Jets 4-point favorites to anybody after that weekend in Arizona?
How are they 2-point favorites against Arizona when they were like 1.5, 2-point underdog? People were betting the Jets last week like they had tomorrow's newspaper. I don't get it. I know you don't really want a piece of Flacco and he's on the road, and we'll see for the point of the season where weather's a factor and can they make explosive plays. Taylor's not the same running back when Richardson's not in there because you don't have the threat of the zone read. All of those things. I'm not laying 4 points with the Jets. I'm just not doing it. It'd be Colts or nothing. I haven't bet the Colts yet, but I was surprised it was 3. I said, how are the Jets laying 3? Then how are the Jets laying 3.5? It's up to 4. So somebody's betting them. Are they setting up a move? Are they laying the points with the Jets to hoping to get a better number on the Colts? I have zero explanation for this.
Yeah, the other one I have no explanation for. The Saints open up as a 3-point favorite against the Browns, and now the Browns are down to 1. People are betting the Browns on the road in New Orleans after New Orleans played as good as they can play. I'm not saying New Orleans is a great team, but that line's moving towards the Browns, and you got Jameis Winston returning to New Orleans. He played there. Maybe they feel like he knows the code to their defense, but for me, I don't understand how that line moved to the Browns. The Browns seem like a mess to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess if you're going to try to make the case for the Browns, you just say these teams are not that far from each other, and home field's maybe worth 1.5 or so. So that's why this line is where it is. Winston maybe has an axe to grind because he was with the Saints but didn't play as much as he wants. Maybe sometimes, I don't know, we see this where the coach, you get a boost week 1 with the new coach, but sometimes that wears off a little bit. Now, this guy's got a lot of energy. I mean, it helped that Atlanta, missed 1 million field goals, but maybe there's a wearing off factor here with the new coach, a Winston revenge spot. I'm not looking to take a point here with the Browns. I don't know that this is a game I'll be involved in, but that 3 was probably too high. I don't know that I have any interest at 1 here. Do you have any feel for this game?
No, it might have been 3. The 3 might have been too high. I just don't trust Winston. I got fooled and duped into thinking that they would have played well against the Chargers after they played well against Baltimore, but they're coming off a bye. I'm always a little hesitant. I think what's pretty clear is the 3 trends that have happened so far this week where the line has moved towards the dog are all the 3 teams that had rest. The Browns are coming off a bye. The Bengals went from a 2.5-point dog down to 1.5. They're coming off a 10-day rest. And then the 49ers against the Seattle, who's coming off a bye, that went from 7 down to 6.5. So to me, maybe there's some inherent rest to line that's making that line move. But I don't like the Chargers. I don't know if I could bet Zach Taylor in this game. I think that Jim Harbaugh, Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator, I think they'll do a good job of corralling this one-dimensional Bengal offense and trying just to force it and control the game with their run game. I think to beat the Bengals, if you're the Chargers, you got to play 3-dimensionally. You got to be able to run the football. You got to be good make them play on the long field, and you got to harass, and you got to make it a 50-pass game for Burrow. Because if Burrow has to throw it all the time, it becomes a problem, and they'll make some mistakes. Your thoughts?
Pretty much an elimination game for Cincy. I mean, if you lose this one, maybe you pretty much can't lose any more the rest of the year. Although, as I say that, you look at the AFC, you might get a wild card with 8 wins, but you get the idea. This is going to be a hard one. This is a very much, what do you call it? A Custer's last stand game for Cincy. They're off a mini bye with the extra rest of Thursday night. So I get the case for the Bengals, just the desperation, the rest, but I don't like Cincy in this spot. I just think the Chargers are a more complete team. I don't know how much we know about the Chargers. They're kind of a quiet, 6-3 here, where nobody really talks about them as a contender. It's all Baltimore. It's all Kansas City. They haven't won pretty. It's all low-scoring games. Are you a believer that, I know they're going to be a playoff team. Maybe they can win a game. Is this a team could actually make the Super Bowl? The Chargers could actually be in the AFC title game, or they're just not that talented enough to be there?
I don't know if they have enough. I don't know if they have enough skill to really do that.
Yeah.
I think to me, but they can run the ball. They can control the pace of the game. Their defense is well coached. They keep the ball in front for the most part. I know Will Levis made the big play, 70-yarder last week, but they play complementary football. They play together as a unit. They don't play in sections like what bad teams do, like the 76ers. And it happens in all sports, right? The 76ers. When you have a bunch of good players and you don't play together as a team, you play in sections. And the Chargers don't. They play as a unified team, something that they didn't do under Brendan Staley. They used to throw it. I mean, last week he throws it 18 times and they win the game. You know, I think to me, they're a hard. They're a hard out. They're a hard team to play. Yeah. Though. I really think so.
I mean, he is one hell of a great coach. I remember you writing about him in like 2009 or 2010 about how he's going to be the next really good coach in the NFL back when he was, I think, in San Diego.
Yep, no question. He really is. He's a great coach. When we come back, I really want to dive into the Eagles Commanders on Thursday night. That line has moved now to 3.5. And I really want to touch base on that because I think this is a game we're going to learn about the Commanders. Come back and join us here on the Lombardi Line.
Sports betting game with VSiN's exclusive betting splits. Stay ahead with real-time market trends and track bet percentages on any matchup, then uncover the edge by comparing them to the amount of bets placed to find out where the sharp money is headed. Upgrade to VSiN Pro to access betting splits, live odds, line moves, power ratings, and in-depth game analysis. Go to VSiN.com/pro to join VSiN, the sports betting network.
This is VSiN, the sports betting network.
This is the Lombardi Line with former NFL executive Michael Lombardi on VSiN, the sports betting network.
This is the Lombardi Line here on a Wednesday. Dave Ross back with Michael Lombardi. And Michael, I got to tell you guys, you and Will Hill are rock stars. You guys were already rock stars to me anyway. But really on a day like today, Michael, where I can't even figure out how to get to work with my car trouble, and I get to listen to you and Will off the top of the show. So I thank you boys, Will, for hopping in there and doing the first half of the show here. But it goes to prove why you have to have the VSiN app. If you don't have the VSiN app right now, what are you waiting for? Because, again, I got to listen to Michael and to Will. You can check it out, Apple App Store, Google Play. You can stream your favorite shows out there like the Lombardi Line. So check it out each and every day. The VSiN Watch app is free. Download both Apple and Android users. And again, go to the App Store or Google App Store, and you can download it now and be a part of the Sports Betting Network. So, gentlemen, I want to pick up where you guys were talking about, and that's tomorrow night's big game there in the City of Brotherly Shove with the Eagles and the Commanders. 3.5 is the number here. Will, I'll start with you because I heard you say you think the environment could be a real problem for the Commanders coming to Philly tomorrow night.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think people just kind of kicked dirt on Philly a little too quick early in the season. People don't like the coach. I get why people, don't like the coach. He's doing weird things against the Falcons that Monday night, which he really botched, where he's, not. And look, I'm a big go for it guy, but when he's going for it, 4th and goal from the 4 in like the first quarter, first half, and then he's, throwing the pass to Barkley, and then he had a weird game against the Saints where he's kicking off field. He coached really poorly early in the season. Then he's the whole thing with yelling at fans. But I think that's thrown people off the scent. This is a really talented team in a league where it's, it's hard to score points. It's hard to move the ball. You have an offensive team with Hurts, who's like a borderline top 10 quarterback. Barkley, A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith with Goddard. That's a really good offensive team, and the defense has started to play better. Now, it's shaky competition, so that they'll be tested here. But I don't think Washington is on this level where they can just go into Philly on a short week, rookie quarterback. I think as you look at Kingsbury's track record, the offensive coordinator, his teams tend to get worse as the season goes along. I just don't know that Washington's on this level yet, Lombardi, where they played respectably against the Ravens, respectably against the Steelers, but they haven't beaten like a really good team. I guess Arizona's their best win, but I just don't think they're tested yet. I think Philly winning this game by a touchdown, 10 points or so, I think is reasonable. So I like Philly here, Michael.
Yeah, I think I think Philly, again, I can understand why. Nick Sirianni's like Lane Kiffin, tough to root for when they're winning. Just way too cocky for me. But you can't dismiss Philly's team. And I think they've really played better defensively. The biggest concern I have in this game, Dave, is what Washington saw last week against Pittsburgh. They saw 2 heavy edges, and they limited Jaden Daniels to 3 rushes. They didn't let him move around. And once you start to see good defensive coordinators take away the strength of the quarterback, that game plan's coming back the next week. It's coming back the next week. I mean, and Vic Fangio's a good coordinator. Now, he's had a short week, but he's going to have a heavy edge like he did against New Orleans. He wasn't going to let New Orleans run the outside zone, so he went on the heavy edges, and he forced the ball. He forced them to play a conventional style of offense without the loose plays, and I think that's where it's going to get into problems. I think the question I have about Washington isn't will they score points. I think Washington's really good. Daniels is outstanding, especially on deep throws. It's how good are they on offense? Can they really cover? Are they going to have Marshawn Lattimore for this game? They're going to need him. They can't cover right now the way it is. And I think that's the difference in this game.
I think all of us throughout the summer kind of like the Eagles because, as we've talked about the adults in the room, and Vic Fangio certainly has been that guy. And I think Kellen Moore is starting to get better. And with his personnel, A.J. Brown back, I think you guys are spot on. It feels like Philly is the right spot here to lay that 3.5 tomorrow night against the Commanders. Another team, Michael and Will, we talked about it this summer too. And I'm kicking myself for the bet I didn't make, right? Should have bet more podcasts. I did not bet the over Broncos win total this year, and I knew it. Michael, you talked about it. Like, it's a bet on the coach, on Sean Payton. The number's going up here, gentlemen, for Denver against the ATL. So, Will, what do you make now of Denver? Do we trust them now in the betting market that we can even lay an extra half point here up from 2 against the Falcons?
Yeah, I mean, the money line is always an option. I'm looking at DraftKings minus 135. So if you don't want to get burned by the 2.5, which is always dicey because Denver plays close, low-scoring games, they're not going to blow anybody away. Atlanta's got a habit too for playing a lot of close, weird games that land on 1 or 2. So maybe you just take the money line. I do like Denver. I mean, look, they're not going to be playing in the AFC title game or anything, but the fact that they're even sniffing around the playoffs is a great year. They absolutely should have won the game last week, so they're better than we thought. I got there late with them in the summer. If you remember Lombardi, I was like, man, you look around. I know we don't really know about the quarterback, but there's a lot of talent on the team, and I think they just got a lot of good players defensively. They're well coached. I know the special teams coach Westhoff. He was on my old podcast. I know he is going to be steaming this week after the way they lost that game because he's an intense guy. But I just think you put still a softish Atlanta team outdoors, cold weather. You make Cousins uncomfortable. I watched Cousins for years as a Vikings fan. When you take him out of that dome, out of his comfort zone, he's a different player. I think he's going to be a little, shaken this week against a good defense on the road, on grass. That's just not his, sort of habitat. I think Denver wins this game here, Lombardi.
I think when you look, if you're Atlanta and you're watching this Kansas City game, you're saying, whoa. I mean, we couldn't do that to Kansas City, what Denver was able to do with their front. Their front, Zach Allen was a man in there. They couldn't block him. And I think, to me, that's the concern you have to have. Denver's front played exceptional on the road. Now they get to play it at home. And I think the one good thing you have going for you, if you're a Bronco fan, is Sean Payton understands how to get the most out of what he wants to do offensively. I think, what we saw out of Bo Nix was he was just very good in the complimentary, made enough plays. They didn't score in the second half, which killed them. They missed that field goal, but they had opportunities in other places. I think, to me, that's going to be the key, right? I think this Denver front's got to control the game, and they got to put pressure. And then, much like what the Saints did to Atlanta, you got to make Atlanta play from behind. You have to make them play from behind. I think that's when they get in trouble.
I want to get to some of your college plays here, Will, in the time that we have remaining. And one of those is another school that we've talked a lot about, and I guess we're firm believers these days, in primetime in Colorado. You got to lay double digits here, Will. Are you willing to do that and say, yeah, the Buffs are legit?
The Buffs seem legit. I mean, it's funny in betting. You want to have conviction, but you can't be married to an opinion. I mean, you got to have a little bit of flexibility. And I realized pretty early that, man, this Colorado team is better defensively, better up front than I thought. And it's getting expensive. Like I said, the 11.5. I don't think Utah can score. Utah has no passing game whatsoever. It's all running. They're okay defensively, but they're not their usual Utah, tough Willingham team. I just think this is a game where they fall behind and they can't play catch up. They can't keep up because Colorado is going to get their 27, 30 points against pretty much anybody. I just don't think Utah can score enough to hang in this game. So this is a game where once they get behind, this could get ugly because Utah, they have to play one certain way, and Colorado's going to get their points. I don't know if Utah can get theirs.
Michael, when you look at that coaching staff for Colorado, what do you make of what Deion's doing there in Boulder? Like, it feels like this year he brought in some other guys to really help him out, and I think it's showing in their performances so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, I was really surprised. I didn't think he would be able to have this kind of season in Colorado, and he's proven me wrong. I mean, they've done a really good job, and they beat Nebraska. I mean, they've done some good things, where I thought that when they took a step up in category in terms of going and playing against Big Ten teams, they wouldn't. The team I'm most disappointed with is Utah. I thought Utah would be in the 12. I thought Utah would be a much better team than they are. I thought they had a Big Ten swagger to them playing in the Big 12. So I'm really disappointed. And Colorado is the surprise team for me. And I think, to me, if they keep winning and they keep going the way they're going and they win the Big 12, they're going to be in the finals.
Absolutely amazing to think that Deion might be able to do that here out there in Colorado. But, yeah, it's definitely there on the horizon.
Hunter's got to be the Heisman, too. Hunter, yeah. If they win out, even if they lose one game, he's played 250 more snaps than anyone else. He's basically a top 5 receiver and a top 5 corner. He's 2 top 5 players rolled into one. I know it's like a quarterback award, and maybe they give it to Gabriel, and Genty's had a great year. To me, boy, I don't know how you guys feel. I think Hunter should win the award.
Oh, I tend to agree with you that you should, if it's not just for quarterbacks here. He's the best non-quarterback, and it's not close. I agree with that. And if we talked about it this summer, you've got to make the college football playoff It shouldn't be a team success award to the individual. But if Colorado gets there, yeah, you got to give it to Hunter. Very quickly, speaking of Utah, they lose a heartbreaker last week in the Civil War to BYU. Now BYU is going to play Kansas and host them. Will, you think this might be a trip-up spot here for BYU?
I like Kansas. They're playing well recently, and if you just look at one-score games, BYU is 4-0, Kansas is 0-5. You could easily have very similar records, a play here, a play there. I think BYU, great story. They've had a good season, but they're living on borrowed time a little bit. I like Kansas. I think Kansas actually beats them.
Ooh. Yeah, and again, we kind of thought that Kansas, again, Utah was going to have the BYU season, and Utah's fallen by the wayside. And I know K-State and Kansas in that rivalry, but Kansas has been underwhelming, right, Will? Even though maybe this is a get-right spot for them, but this has not been the season they thought they'd have.
No, but better the last month or so. They buried Houston. They lost by 2 at Kansas State. They played better here this last month or so. They got a good quarterback and a good coach. It just they lost some close games early and it got off track for them.
Did you get all your Jets anger out before I got here for the show today? Did you get it all out?
You got to go to break.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about Michael's writing about the Bears and what's going on in Chicago. We'll delve into that when we come back here on the Lombardi Line.
Got a good thing coming, just wait and see. It's a good.
You spoke, we listened. Introducing the all-new VSiN Watch app. Now, you can watch and listen to VSiN expert analysis live wherever you are. Missed a show? No problem. Catch replays of VSiN's full lineup at any time. View highlights sorted by sport. Or use the search feature to find specific teams and topics you're looking for. And the best part? It's free for a limited time. Download the VSiN Watch app today. Available now on the App Store and Google Play. And join us on the Sports Betting Network.
This is the Lombardi Line with former NFL executive Michael Lombardi on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
We continue the Lombardi Line here on a Wednesday. Dave Ross here at Circus Sports in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. Back with our GM, Michael Lombardi, on the East Coast. And, Michael, it is cold. It's November, right?
Yeah.
And in the writing spotlight today, you kind of get to the Midwest and the Bears and how it feels like it's Groundhog Day all over again here.
Yeah.
Can you tell the people about what you wrote about and maybe if there's any hope for the Bears to get out of this perpetual rut that they seem to be in?
Well, I mean, look, Bear fans just want their quarterback to be good because it's something they haven't experienced, whether it's been Mitchell Trubisky, whether it's been Justin Fields. I mean, they've had such great hope and aspirations for every rookie quarterback they've selected. And obviously, Caleb Williams isn't playing well, but I think this is more of a structural issue than it is actually Caleb Williams. And I'm not making excuses for him because he's his own man. He needs to own up to the fact that he's really struggled throwing the ball over 10 yards. But to me, this is a Ryan Poles problem. And I've said it going back to the offseason when Bear fans were betting the Bears on the over total like they were drunken sailors. Nobody could help it. That line was like you couldn't help them. You couldn't control them because they were so enthusiastic about their team. They love their team, and you love that they're that way. But I think to me the biggest issue here is this offensive line is a disaster. They play with no power. And Poles has built a nickel team, and he's gotten great publicity for it. He spends over $20 million for Keenan Allen. He averages under 10 yards a catch. He drafts Roman Odunze, the 9th pick, good player. But do you need 3 receivers that are all making this huge amount of money? Do you really need that? You signed Cole Kmet to a contract extension. Great. You signed Gerald Everett to a contract, a free agency. Do you need that? I mean, how about some younger players? How about some toughness? How about another offensive guard? You signed Nate Davis, and basically now he's a backup. You have no interior offensive line. The left tackle's hurt, but not a good player when he was healthy. I mean, nothing comes together. And I think it goes back to this whole model that they use at Hallis Hall, where they have a president, they have a general manager, they have a coach, and so basically they have 3 units that none of them work together. And Eberflus will pay the price for this. He'll get fired. Poles won't because people will say, well, they have a really talented team. Well, they really don't. They have some talented players, but they don't have a team that fits together. They have no toughness. They play in Chicago. Look, go back to when they were good with Buddy Ryan and Mike Ditka. They had a defensive line that would all those guys are in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
They
were not great on offense. I mean, they had Sweetness, who was a tremendous runner. But, I mean, Jim McMahon was an average quarterback. He was good. He managed the team effectively. Nothing taken against him. But they played to the style of the city, right?
Yeah.
They were a team that mirrored the town. They were tough, physical. This team is a 7-on-7 team. And that's the problem with them. And now that they get to the schedule, look at this schedule, Dave. Have you seen their schedule coming up?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of conference game or divisional games, and you see that adjusted win total at 6.5. And you made the point, Michael. This summer, it was 8.5. The juice on that 8.5 over was $1.65. We're going, what are we talking about here? Like you're locking them in as a 9-win team, and now it's already down to 6.5 here. I don't even know if I want a part of them winning 7 games. Like you're right. You look at the schedule. It's Packers. It's Vikings. You got the Lions coming up. Packers again. I mean, there's a lot of divisional games there, and 2 with the Lions. There's no let up from Detroit. San Francisco's going to need those wins. Seattle, if they're hanging in there. I mean, that's a brutal schedule. How do they get to 7?
I don't know. I mean, like nobody really talks about like how are they going to beat Detroit? How do you beat Minnesota? How do you beat Green Bay? Well, you better be really good in both lines if you're going to beat Detroit, right? You're going to have to go into 2 dome stadiums. You go into dome stadiums and you have a bad line, it's not good.
Right.
You go into dome stadiums with a bad offensive line, it's the worst thing you could be. Bad lines don't travel. And they have a bad line. Their tackle situation, I know they drafted Wright in the first round. If you think he's a first-round level player, God bless you. Good luck. But to me, they have a hard time. The quarterback gets hit, and then he holds the ball too long. They had no player development plan for the quarterback, right? They had no – and all he kept talking about, we're not going to punt. Well, you've punted 45 times already this year. So you are going to punt a lot, right? And you have no power running back. Okay, you have this. You have a guy on the roster, DeSwift, who's a good player, but maybe Johnson could be their power back, a kid they drafted, in 23 in the 4th round, but he hasn't demonstrated that he's got all the things you need, and they can't really knock anybody off the ball. This goes back to training camp. Who are we? Are we going to be a physical team? See, here's what I think happens a lot. All these guys that come from Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy, Matt Nagy, Ryan Poles, they all see Andy Reid as a 7-on-7 guy. He wants skill players. He wants guys to put the ball in the end zone. But they missed that Andy Reid's a tough guy. Andy Reid was an offensive lineman. He coached offensive line. Like, his teams are tough. They're physical. He runs tough training camps. He gets his team ready. They get better as the year goes on. Because why? They practice.
Right.
I mean, last week against the Patriots, it didn't look like the Bears had any physicality to their team at all.
That's that performance. That's the outlier where you go, man, that's the one that the coaches get fired for. You understand it when you saw that 19-3 loss to the Patriots at home. And again, they just look like they had no physicality, to your point. And by the way, if you want to check out Michael's writings, and again, become a VSiN Pro subscriber, when you do so, you're going to have access to everything we do, which is daily best bets. You're going to get 19 hours of live programming. You can check out your favorite shows like the Lombardi Line, Power, Strength, and betting, better ratings, plus our exclusive betting splits with trends and analysis, going to make you a better bettor. So you can sign up today, VSiN.com/subscribe. That's VSIN.com/subscribe. I wanted to talk about when you wrote about November 10th and the significance of that date of the season where teams start to realize kind of where they are and what they have. Why does that November 10 kind of stick out as a real barometer for teams in the NFL?
Well, we've always used it. A bunch of my friends in the league, we've always used it because of the symbolism that's associated to the wreck of the Emmett Fitzgerald as the day that kind of like we all send text to one another and talk about the Gordon Lightfoot song about how the church bells will ring 29 times, because there is some similarity to the season beginning and the season ending for some. And who's going to make it to Whitefish Bay? In the song, they said, if they put 15 more miles behind them, they would have made Whitefish Bay. Well, that's the goal, right? How do we get to Whitefish Bay? And I think, to me, what happens now more than ever, David, is because of the new rules and the new collective bargaining agreement, practicing is harder than ever. Teams, and they get to November, they don't want to practice. They don't want to be able to do the things that they need to do to make their team better and get their pad level lower and stay really good, because there's no longer training camp. You can only have one padded practice a week now. And I think the good coaches are really out there coaching hard. Mike Tomlin's coaching his team hard. They're practicing hard. Detroit, they're practicing hard. You could see it in how they play, the physicality. But you could also see some teams that are doing more walkthroughs. And I think that's why we'll see the end of the season. We see like the Miami Dolphins, they're 4-10 the second half of the season, because Mike McDaniels, he's more worried about resting and keeping his players fresh than he is practicing. And as we've seen, you've got to be able to practice to be good. You just can't show up and play like Embiid did last night. Oh, I'm just going to show up and be great. No, you're not. You're horrible. You can't even hold on. You can't even stand on your own 2 feet. Anybody who watched that game thinks that Joel Embiid's a superstar was watching a different game, because you can't. You got to practice to be good. You got to practice. And football, more than ever, you have to practice. And it requires pad level and toughness and tackling. When you don't tackle, those 3-yard games become 20-yard gains, and that's the big issue.
I know we're never going to go back to two-a-days and the old school ways of the NFL, but to get back to the place that you're talking about, the way the practice habits happen, does that take old school mentality to do that in the new world era where the new rules? No.
No, all you have to do is teach that you got to go out there, and if you're in shells, which you can be in, you're going to practice with tempo. It isn't physicality, it's tempo. You got to have tempo to the practice. Bill Walsh, he did away with 2-a-days way back when he was coaching, but his teams were physical. Don't ever confuse that. They were physical because we knew how to practice without pads on. You got to find a way to practice and keep your pad level and keep your fundamentals really good, but also not wear out your team. Like, I'm not out there wanting to just wear out the team.
Right.
But I want to go to practice, and I want things that are going to because remember this, there's a sign that hung in the team room in New England from Belichick. Practice execution becomes game reality. Practice execution becomes game reality. And that's what's true. If you don't practice good, you're not going to play good.
Fascinating. Because, again, it feels like a lot of people today go, oh, well, those are archaic, old-school mentality. No, it's just about practice makes perfect, the habits that you form from practice, taking those over into game day, that's what you're getting at, right? That's what the great coaches still in this league do. And not everybody, the younger coaches, are still trying to figure out that lesson.
Yeah, I think there's no question about that. I mean, if you can do that, I think to me, that's why these coaches, and that's why November 10th is a significant day, because ultimately, if you got to keep the momentum going in terms of being a good team. I think Houston's challenged to do that this year. They're going to have to figure that out too.
And that is certainly a challenge for the Bears going forward. Great write-up as always, Michael. And again, become a VSiN Pro subscriber. Hour number 2 of the Lombardi Line, straight ahead.
Sports bettors, this is your chance. VSiN is bringing you an unbeatable deal. Get a